I've been working as a security guard for over 6 years. Thanks to my seniority and experience, I usually get to pick the shifts I want. Mornings or evenings were always my preference, peaceful, predictable, and safe. But when our company took over a strange new contract, things changed. This wasn't just any building. It was a massive 6-story government facility, isolated in the middle of nowhere. To get there, you had to drive 3 miles down a side road, deep into the woods, away from the main highway. The place was surrounded by a tall 10-foot fence topped with barbed wire. Only one entrance and one exit, both heavily secured. Beyond the fence? Just endless trees. No houses, no stores, no signs of life for miles. During the day, the building had multiple guards. But at night, especially on weekends, there was only one me. At first, I refused. Overnight shifts in a place like that weren't appealing. But when my supervisor begged me to cover a few weekends until new hires came in, I reluctantly agreed. I needed the overtime money anyway, since I was preparing to move into a new apartment. The first 2 weekends passed quietly. Just me, the cameras, and the sound of the wind. But on the third Saturday night, during a violent thunderstorm, everything changed. It was around 2 a.m. The rain hammered against the windows, and the lightning lit up the sky in quick, violent flashes. I was in the control room on the top floor. 3 big monitors displayed all the CCTV feeds, hallways, stairwells, outside parking lot. To pass the time, I kept the lights off, played games on my old Game Boy, and watched movies I had downloaded on my phone. After sitting for too long, I stretched my legs, walked to the window, and peeked outside. The wind whipped trash and leaves across the lot. Then a flash of lightning illuminated the woods. That's when I saw it. A shadowy figure darted between 2 trees, maybe 20 feet apart, just outside the fence. I froze, staring, waiting for another strike of lightning. Seconds later, another flash came, but this time, nothing. The trees swayed violently, but the figure was gone. I told myself it was fatigue, a trick of the eyes. I almost laughed at how paranoid I felt. But that was only the beginning. I left the window and went down the hall to grab an energy drink from the vending machine. On my way back, I chugged it down, trying to shake off the drowsiness. When I returned to the control room, one of the outside camera feeds was gone. The screen for the back parking lot flickered with static. Confused, I walked to the window again. Sure enough, the camera was dangling from its wires, swinging violently in the storm. I assumed the wind must have knocked it loose. I made a quick note in my nightly report and went back to my desk. But a few minutes later, the real horror began. The security system let out its sharp alert tone. Someone had accessed a restricted door. I opened the access logs, my blood ran cold. The door that had been opened was the back entrance. The one right by the broken camera. And worse, whoever it was had the code. The system showed a green light, access granted. I grabbed the desk phone, dead. Static only. My cell had no service. Panic set in. The only option was to move, find service, or at least get closer to an exit. I stepped out into the hall, walking quickly toward the stairwell, phone in hand, praying for a signal. Halfway down the hall, the lights went out. The entire building plunged into darkness. The only sound was the storm outside and the thundering of my own heartbeat. I was near the stairwell, so I yanked the door open and slipped inside. The stairwell was pitch black, only faintly lit when lightning flickered through the narrow windows. I decided to head down quietly, planning to escape through the front lobby to my truck. I had just passed the 4th floor when the sound of a door opening echoed below me. I froze. Heavy footsteps began climbing the stairs. Slow at first, then deliberate. I tightened my grip on my pistol. I had training, yes, but I had never fired it in the field. I didn't want to find out if I could. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I turned and climbed back toward the top floor as quietly as I could. At the top of the stairwell was a ladder leading to a roof hatch. I decided to hide there in the darkness. But as I turned, my gun banged against the metal railing clang. The footsteps below immediately stopped. Silence. Then suddenly, they thundered upward. Whoever it was had heard me. I sprinted up the stairs, heart hammering. Near the top, I shoved the door open hard, letting it slam. Then I ran to the ladder and climbed up, crouching just below the hatch. The plan worked for a moment. The intruder reached the landing, paused, then burst through the door into the hallway, assuming I had gone that way. The heavy door slammed shut behind him. I dropped from the ladder, landing with a thud, and bolted down the stairwell. But the noise gave me away. The door flew open again, and the pounding footsteps returned, closer, faster. It became a desperate chase. My boots slammed against the concrete, his just behind me. Every flight of stairs echoed like gunshots. Somehow, I stayed one floor ahead. When I reached the lobby, luck was finally on my side. Behind me, I heard a loud crash and a cry of pain. The man had fallen. I didn't wait to look. I shoved through the lobby doors, ran into the storm, and sprinted to my truck. As I fumbled with the keys, I looked back. The intruder was already outside, sprinting across the lot toward me. He was dressed all in black, his face hidden by a mask and hood. In one hand, he carried something metallic. I jumped into my truck, slammed it into reverse, and sped out of the lot, tires screeching. Only when I reached the main road did I finally get cell service. I called the police immediately. It took them 15 minutes to arrive. We drove back to the building together. I told them everything, step by step. We searched the stairwell, the hallways, even the woods outside. Nothing. But they did find one thing. On the stairwell landing where the man had fallen, the police discovered a fully loaded, unregistered semi-automatic handgun. Whoever he was, he had come armed, prepared, and determined. And he had almost cornered me. To this day, no one knows why he was there or what he wanted inside that government building. There was nothing valuable, no cash, no sensitive files that we knew of. Just office floors and empty halls. But I'll never forget the sight of him charging after me in that storm. And I'll never forget the sound of his footsteps closing in, echoing in the stairwell, reminding me that luck, not training, was the only reason I'm still alive today. I've worked night security for most of my adult life. It's a lonely job, long hours, empty hallways, and cameras to stare at. But it pays the bills. One of my contracts was in New Jersey, in a medium-sized corporate office building. 6 floors, underground parking garage, and a bland lobby. Nothing special. By day it buzzed with employees, but at night it became a hollow, lifeless shell. Usually, my shift was uneventful. Sit at the desk, watch the monitors, make hourly patrols. But one particular Thursday night turned into the most terrifying shift of my career. It was around 1:30 a.m. I was sitting at the lobby desk, sipping stale coffee, watching the monitors. The garage camera caught my eye. In the middle of the dimly lit parking area, I saw a man. He stood unnaturally still, dressed in a long, dark coat. His head was lowered slightly, like he was staring at the ground. He wasn't moving toward the cars, or toward the elevator, he was just standing there. I frowned, grabbed my flashlight, and headed downstairs. The garage was empty. The concrete echoed with my footsteps, and the air smelled of oil and dampness. I swept my flashlight across every row of cars. No man. I shrugged it off, assuming maybe the camera glitched. But when I returned to the monitors, my stomach dropped. He was back. The same man, in the same spot, staring at the ground. This time I stayed at the desk, staring at the feed. My pulse quickened as the man finally moved. Slowly, he turned toward the garage stairwell door. I clicked to the stairwell camera feed. Nothing. Then I checked the elevator camera. My breath caught in my throat. The elevator was rising. Floor by floor, up toward the lobby. I stood from my chair, flashlight ready, my other hand resting on the grip of my pistol. The bell dinged, and the elevator doors slid open in front of me. But the lobby was empty. No man. No coat. Nothing. Then I noticed it, the floor in front of the elevator was wet. A set of barefoot footprints led out of the elevator, across the lobby tile, and stopped at the hallway. The hair on my arms stood straight. I radioed dispatch, but static answered back. My phone showed no signal. Reluctantly, I followed procedure, a patrol of each floor. If there was an intruder, I had to confirm it. When I reached the 5th floor, the air felt heavier. The long carpeted hallway stretched into shadows. Offices with glass walls lined either side. The storm outside rattled the windows, thunder booming faintly. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Wet, deliberate, and slow. I spun, flashlight beam cutting through the hall. Nothing. I moved forward, scanning each office. But then I realized those footsteps weren't echoing in front of me. They were behind me. I turned sharply. At the far end of the hall, half hidden in darkness, the man in the long coat stood still, watching. My throat went dry. I raised my light toward him, but by the time the beam touched the end of the hall, he was gone. I walked backward, my heart hammering. Then the sound returned, wet footsteps, but now they were closer. Who's there? I shouted, my voice trembling. No answer. Only the steady, deliberate steps. I broke into a run, sprinting toward the stairwell. I pushed the door open and nearly stumbled down the first flight. The footsteps followed, quicker this time, echoing against the stairwell walls. Every instinct told me to get out, to escape, but procedure told me I had to confirm the building was clear. By the 3rd floor, I was nearly gasping for air. The footsteps suddenly stopped. I turned, flashlight shaking. The stairwell was empty. Then bang! A door below slammed shut. I burst out onto the 2nd floor, ran down the hall, and stopped to catch my breath. My ears strained for any sound. The building was silent, except for the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Then my radio crackled. It wasn't dispatch, it was just static, mixed with what almost sounded like breathing. Slow, heavy, and distorted. Who's on this channel? I demanded, but there was no reply. Just more static, and that faint, chilling breath. By the time backup arrived 30 minutes later, I was shaking. 2 more guards joined me, and we swept the building top to bottom. Nothing. No intruder, no footprints, no wet floor. Even the cameras showed nothing unusual. Except one. The garage feed, the one where I had first seen the man, was corrupted. Just a smear of static and distorted shapes. I reported everything, word for word. My supervisor didn't believe me. He said maybe I dozed off, maybe I imagined it. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know the sound of wet footsteps following me still, echoing in my dreams. I was fresh into my job as a mobile security guard. At that time, I was still in training, shadowing a senior officer who was supposed to show me the ropes. Most of our shifts involved small businesses, offices, or retail stores. Nothing too exciting. But my very first overnight assignment ended up being something I will never forget. It was a rainy Saturday night in Toronto, just after 11 p.m. Dispatch called us about a break-in at a medical clinic attached to a pharmacy. The clinic had been closed for hours, but alarms kept tripping and no staff were on site. Just procedure, my supervisor told me. Most of these are false alarms, wind, doors not locked, that kind of thing. We drove out there together in the patrol car. The building sat in a quiet plaza, surrounded by other shops. Everything was dark except the clinic itself, where one fluorescent light flickered behind the glass front. As we pulled in, I noticed something strange immediately. The underground parking garage gate was wide open, swaying slightly in the wind. We stepped inside through the front. The glass door was cracked, the lock clearly busted. My supervisor muttered a curse and drew his flashlight. The lobby was empty, just chairs, old magazines, and the faint smell of disinfectant. But somewhere deeper inside, I could hear an elevator. The light above it shifted floors. Nobody was supposed to be here. We exchanged a glance. He nodded at me, signaling to follow as we crept toward the back hallway. The elevator stopped at the 4th floor. When we got there, the entire level was pitch black. I scanned with my flashlight, bouncing the beam across closed clinic doors. It felt like every shadow stretched too far. Suddenly, from the far end of the hallway, we both heard it, footsteps. Not hurried, not panicked, calm, steady footsteps, moving toward the stairwell. We rushed to follow, but when we opened the stairwell door, the echo of those steps was already moving down, growing faint, then silent. We searched floor after floor. Empty. No voices, no sign of anyone. But the elevator continued to move, doors opening and closing by itself. Uneasy, my supervisor radioed dispatch. His voice was tense now. "This isn't a false alarm. Send another unit immediately." For a moment, the radio was quiet. Then static filled the speaker, followed by a strange sound like someone breathing into the mic. Dispatch came through a second later, confused, insisting they hadn't transmitted anything yet. I remember the way my supervisor's face shifted, like he realized this wasn't just some junkie or vandal. Something about the building felt wrong. When the senior supervisor arrived with backup, we did a full sweep. We moved in pairs, flashlights, radios, pistols drawn. The 4th floor was searched top to bottom. Nothing. The clinic rooms were dark, equipment lined up neatly, chairs pushed in, cabinets locked. We were about to clear the floor when it happened. The stairwell door at the far end burst open. We all froze, flashlights aimed. But instead of a person stepping out, we only heard it, the pounding of footsteps sprinting downward. One of the guards shouted, charging after the noise. The rest of us followed, hearts hammering. We tore down the stairwell, each flight echoing with heavy footfalls ahead of us. But every time we reached a landing, the door was already swinging shut, as if someone was just one step ahead. By the time we hit the main floor and burst into the lobby, the sound was gone. The only thing out of place was the front door. It was wide open, swaying slightly from the wind. Rain blew inside, soaking the tile. We rushed outside into the storm, flashlights sweeping across the empty parking lot. Not a single soul in sight. But the water on the ground told another story. Bare, wet footprints leading away from the building, across the lot, and vanishing into the darkness beyond the plaza lights. The police arrived later, did their own sweep, and took statements. They found no sign of forced entry except the front door, no broken windows, no tampered locks inside. Nothing was stolen. Yet the logs from the security system showed multiple doors accessed throughout the night. Someone had been moving through the building. The footage from the cameras should have confirmed everything. But when we checked the DVR, the files from that night were corrupted. Glitched, fragmented, unwatchable. All we had were those footprints, the memory of footsteps echoing in the stairwell, and the sound of someone running into the night. That was my first week on the job. Most people would have quit right there, but for some reason, I didn't. I stayed. Maybe out of stubbornness, maybe because I didn't want to look weak. But to this day, whenever I get called to a clinic or pharmacy at night, I remember that sound, the heavy, rushing footsteps just beyond sight. And I wonder if whoever was in that building is still out there, waiting for another dark, empty place.